If I was walking on this pathway 65 plus years ago, I'd been walking on a railway that helped connect Southampton and Andover, Swindon, on up to Cheltenham. Now specifically I'm grumpy about this because I live at the south end of it, and the journey from my place up to Swindon will take 39 minutes by car. Currently a railway journey from the same locations, well, Google tells me to take the bus, which takes 2 hours and 3 minutes. A train journey will take me between 1 hour 49 and 2 hours 16. Now I'm confident that problem isn't unique. I could pick 100 examples around the country, I'm sure. All these seemingly vital connections, now lost lines. And whilst that could potentially bring in a small income for someone that makes videos about abandoned railways, or at worst give you a gorgeous path to walk along or cycle on, well, when you're trying to consider public transport as a way forward for communities, it's a crying shame we no longer have these connections. So what exactly went wrong? Welcome to the story of how all lines lead to London, or perhaps better titled, Beeching was right and wrong, and also right, but also wrong. It's the 27th of March 1963, enter stage left, the good Dr. Beeching. Now this really is in truth the end of the story, the end of the railways in the UK, at least it was back then. Dr. Beeching was about to deliver the final nail in the coffin that had been sat waiting to be buried for decades. Nice. So just up ahead of me here, hidden away in the trees, is an abandoned station. We're a little further south now than where we started this video, but albeit on the same route. Fullerton Junction, closed in the Beeching era. It was set to be one of the most important stations in the south because it was on the bottom end of a really important branch line. This branch line was built on the Rolls Royce of railways, double tracked, 2 stations along it, which was huge. There was one problem. Okay, so the pathway here goes on a little upslope. Just so happens that upslope is eastern end or southeastern end of the island platform of this huge junction station that was here. And that means that we can still see the platforms, the track bed, you name it. It's all still here for you to see, hidden away in the hedge if you know what you're looking for. I always struggle when I'm here with what should we do with this? Should we leave it here for all the wildlife, or should we sort of uncover it and show people the heritage that was here? Still don't know the answer to that question. What exactly was the problem? This line, this branch line, was built as an insurance policy because there was another railway company building another parallel line to the east, only a few kilometres that way. So this was built to offer to that company. Why don't you use this beautiful line, the stations, everything that we've built? Use this, it'll cost you nothing. You don't need to build your line. They refused, and this pretty much became redundant from the word go. There was no real joined up thinking back then. If you had the money and the influence in Parliament, you built a railway. Regardless, there was no one to really say, well, don't build that railway until you've got approval from the other line that they're actually going to use it in the first place. And of course, throughout the early 1900s, you could probably hear the tones of the road and the bus in the background, taking you from doorstep to doorstep. Beeching's report, The Reshaping of British Railways, remains with us today, and his aim was simply to make the railways profitable concern. With the backing of the Prime Minister at the time, Harold Macmillan, who he himself once declared,
"You can pour all the money you want into the railways, but you can never make the damn things pay for themselves."
Beeching identified 2,363 stations to be closed, along with over 5,000 miles of track. This would amount to 1/3 of the railway infrastructure. It would amount to a loss of 67,000 jobs. The railways at the time were indeed losing £300,000 per day. Beeching made it really clear in that report this was the end of an era, the end of the social service that railways gave communities. And even back here in places like Fullerton, well, let's be really clear, it did change the lives of people on the railways. From the early incarnations, the Stockton and Darlington in 1825, the first passenger service, all the way through the next 20 or 30 years of railway mania, where railways were popping up everywhere. Every village, every town. It really did change the lives of those people in the town. And reached the far end of Fullerton, because this looks like the goods platform of any railway. There's no real platform, it's just sort of engineering bricks sat on top of some concrete. Britain did love its railways, and it probably saw the peak in the early 1900s, the turn of the century, before the wars, before the bus, and before change slowly started happening. If you had a railway in your town or village, it was yours to prosper. London would be different though. London would need to be different. There's no through line on the cards, not now and not for a very long time. London was an early settlement, likely soon after the last ice age, evidence of Bronze Age crossings to the west. From that point forward, the Roman era, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, and on into the Middle Ages, London became the capital, and perhaps it was the Reformation of the Tudor period that meant that many properties were passed from the church to private individuals. Perhaps this accelerated the growth, the rapid expansion of London fast becoming the economic centre. The land value was high and would continue to rise. How exactly would this early development affect the rails? This evolution of disproportionate land value. The social service came crashing to an end in March 1963 when Beeching himself muttered the words,
"I have no experience of railways, so I'm not a practical railway man, but I am a practical man."
Beeching was tasked with cutting out anything that wasn't making money, where there was no profit. This meant cutting out the big sections that were taking up a disproportionate amount of revenue to run, and of course not bringing a great deal in. And that makes perfect sense. If you're going to build a railway and you want it to make money, well, you stick it between two large populations. The death of the rural railway had begun a while ago. The Beeching report certainly helped expedite this. So what went wrong? Why was this not thought of in the first place? Where was this joined up thinking that we talk about? Well, to some degree it was. Some of the earliest railway companies' names even stated their intention. London and Southampton Railway, London and Birmingham, for example. But then something changed. London and Southampton Railway changed to perhaps better reflect the geography of the area they wanted to encapsulate. They changed their name to London and South Western Railway, and they weren't the only ones. Let's head north a tad. Let's head to a railway which was set to connect the line between Princess Risborough and the GWR line down near Didcot. It was, like so many, privately backed. The Earl of Macclesfield and Thomas Taylor, an exceedingly wealthy cotton mill owner, stumped up between them 80% of the funds for this line. 1869 a royal assent was gained, and within 12 months of this line opening, they realised that it wasn't the pot of gold that they had envisaged. It didn't even connect its original route. And that example is one of many I could recite you. If you had money and a bit of power in Parliament, you could pretty much guarantee yourself a railway. The tough bit was making it profitable, all that whilst the railway giants stood over you, watching, squeezing you at every opportunity. That was how Britain's rural railways shaped up, often with private investors who had absolutely zero railway knowledge and certainly no eye on the bigger picture. Their remit was cash. Throughout the 20th century, this early lack of joined up thinking for the railways as a whole started to hurt the industry. The railways at this stage really needed a drastic solution if they want to avert an impending crisis. The First World War came and the entire network was brought under government control. And how have I never seen that before? Looks like an obviously old plate layer's hut. I always feel a bit ashamed when I find something like this. I probably should have found a long time ago on my local line. Now that apparent nationalisation during World War I was quite a success and it brought a number of advantages. It may have been a good time to realise those advantages and nationalise then, but sadly it wasn't on the cards. The picture for Britain's railways went from poor to bleak though. Grouping joined 120 companies into 4 in 1923, and in 1948 finally nationalisation of the entire network was put in place. Now this did have an initial impact of positivity, but it seemed too little too late. Within a decade, losses were once again piling up. All that was needed now was for Beeching to hammer the nail in the coffin, the final nail, and he certainly did that. And from that day forward, well, the shape of the railways hasn't really changed much from what we see today. All lines lead to London. So let's take a journey from my hometown to Manchester. So I can either sit on a Voyager for 4 hours or 15 minutes, or I can head to London. 1 hour to London, change, head to Euston, and then 2 hours. Quicker, despite travelling through London. Now that brings us nicely onto the next issue. London, population between 8 and 9 million, 14 terminus stations, 14. So what's the difference? I've been to Manchester plenty of times and I've only ever used one station, 1 or 2 platforms. I've been to London countless times. I've used 5 or 6 different stations. 1830s London was well established as the economic centre of the UK. London's location next to the river and its European neighbours perhaps led to this, but either way, real estate in London's centre is said to have caused a barring of any lines to cross London during this heightened activity of railway building. Now, well, that's not true per se. There was no direct law that said that railway companies can't propose lines through the centre of London. The Royal Commission on the Metropolitan's Railway Termini made some very strong recommendations. Now these recommendations, placed firmly in the minds of those passing royal assent, meant that it needed to protect London's interior from incursions by overground railways. That's a really brief look at what would probably make for a good video in itself. That shaped how London looked for the next few decades and probably a century and beyond. It would take until 1988 for things to change. It would take until 1988 and again in 2022. And both these things gave us little hope that perhaps some of these old lines might well be profitable once again. 1988 and 2022 gave us Thameslink and Crossrail respectively, essentially crossing London, and guess what? They're pretty busy. So maybe I'm thinking of things too layman. Maybe I'm thinking of things in the wrong way, but perhaps the Thameslink and Crossrail really gives me hope that we can start thinking about things in more of a joined up way with a big plan we haven't done for a long time. HS2 gives me hope, and whatever side of the fence you're on with regards that, I think we'll all agree they've done a terrible job of selling themselves, but the first time we've had a joined up thinking about our railway network, the first time we've actually thought of removing express from the main lines and thinking of express and regional and freight in a different way, and that helps our network. I think if we really want to get ourselves out of a car and the pollution and the traffic and make a modal shift to rail, then we really need to start thinking about things in a different way, a joined up way, and perhaps maybe all lines shouldn't point to London. Thanks Thanks for taking the time to watch this, everyone. Your viewership is genuinely appreciated. If you want to join us for behind the scenes videos and a Discord community, well, you can sign up to our Patreon and our members, or our members, the YouTube members. All those links are in the description below. But for me, thank you very much, and we'll see you this time next week.